PewterCast fans and listeners to the second to last entry of Training Camp with Ren. I'm your host, as always. Well, that's not true, because I guess Brent was a host twice. I am your host, mostly, Ren Daxt. Find me at Twitter, at Ren Daxt, REN_DAXT. I'm always down to talk Buccaneers football with any of their Bucs fans. And so let's get started. Beadgate, we're going to go there. If you listened to yesterday's pod, I talked about how when you're walking in before you get to the stands in practice, there's a pirate ship and they're playing music, and there's a few employees tossing beads to you, and no matter how hard I try not to give them eye contact, which I never have, they continue to throw beads at me. And then I said today, I sort of threw down the gauntlet yesterday. If they toss beads at me tomorrow, there's going to be repercussions the next day, which will be tomorrow, the last day of open practice for anyone. So that's why tomorrow will be the last entry for the journal. But they didn't throw the beads at me. So I guess that's that for Beadgate. They had, I took all I could stand, and I could stands no more, as Popeye used to say. But they didn't toss them at me today. So Beadgate is no more. Now, if I get hit tomorrow, I don't really care tomorrow if they toss them at me. I'll get it. But if I get hit tomorrow, like they hit me, yesterday with the beads, then we might have another story on the last episode. But as of now, all is forgiven, and I will not be plotting my revenge against the hype men or hype guys for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. So that will bring us to the building, the indoor facility. I've talked many times about when I thought the outer skin was going to be on, and it seems like they're to the point where no more is going to go up. If you're looking at the building long ways, so you're facing one of the long sides, and that side faces the Buccaneers property, which the opposite long side would actually face a neighborhood. The side that faces the neighborhood still has that big hole right in the middle, like all the way. Like they filled it top and bottom, all the way to the middle from both sides, and I still believe that's there to be able to pull, semis and flatbeds down that, city road, and they can crane the supplies off the back of the flatbeds and bring them through that hole and then dump them on the inside of the building. But something interesting, well, I don't know if it's interesting, you might find it interesting. The long side that actually faces, one buck in the property, they've done the entire top half. They don't have panels long enough to go from the top to the bottom. It is a very tall structure, as far as, like a field house goes. But the bottom half is not filled in. They did the whole top half, and the bottom half, there's nothing. And I was thinking about it, and I've decided that's where the bleachers are probably going to be. That's the side of where, if you've seen artist renditioning, they sort of have, nice chairs, basically the same sort of setup they have in Ray J as far as bleachers. And so once they start to construct that bleacher area, and of course they're going to butt it up against the wall to save as much space as possible, but you will never be able to get underneath it. That's why the bottom half of that long side is open, so guys can still work on the underside. I don't know, obviously tightening bolts and things like that. But I'm sure there's lots of as you're installing the bleachers, it's probably a lot easier to have somebody under it and on top of it with, like possibly a crane helping moving sections in. So that's what I've come up with. So as far as skinning the whole entire building, I think they're done. There is one little spot on the short side on either end. The bigger opening is going to be where the glass is. We have those glass windows that, as you're watching practice, you could sort of look over to your right and look out the glass windows and see Ray J in the background, which I think was a cool touch. And then there's just this little spot where It looks like they're working on it some days it's not, so I'm not really sure. But they've already started on the inside. Like there's a scoreboard hanging. It looks like basically your generic high school gym scoreboard. One side says Bucks, the other side says Guest. On the other end, there's a 45-second clock hanging. There's two little structures uh, at each end with a couple of doorways. At first, I thought it was maybe, oh, that's where concessions come out of, or maybe the retail shop. But there was no really like windows. It was just two doors on each one. So I'm figuring they're bathrooms. So they're gonna have a bathroom on each end of the field for fans. To be able to get to sort of cut down on the traffic because it is 3,500 people are sitting out there and they seem to hit that number or really close to it on during weekend practices. So that's your update on the building. Like I said, the whole thing's skinned. One last thing that they're starting to move the dirt out of the inside. Lots of dirt moving around by bulldozers and things. And I took a peek in there the best I could, and they actually probably seen those machines that beat up and down really quickly, sort of like to settle the ground and level it out and to pack the dirt down before they add the next surface that they're doing. So yeah, there was a guy in there running one of those machines today. So that's about all that's going on with the building. And lastly, sort of to open the show, I'd like to start with very sad news, or finish with very sad news. The let's try this again. The Ali Marpet and Donovan Smith show is not going to come back for season 2 with Casey Phillips. I guess we talked a little bit about on the last podcast we had Talking Knox. There's a question in the chat room about it. I've thought about it. I've seen questions on Twitter about it. So I remembered when I was at practice right before, Bucks Insider started, because they film outside. They start at 9. Practice starts at 8:45. I remembered, so I shot the, question to Casey. I was like, question for Casey. Is season 2 coming? Hashtag Bucks Live. And I guess she had just recently gotten the answer. She said that she'd been I don't say bombarded, but she gets that question a lot about what's happening, and she said that it's not coming, but it's not due that none of the three wanted it to happen. They're just sort of changing up on the radio side what they're doing this year. She said there's going to be a coaches show. I'm assuming this is what I'm hoping. I'm hoping there's always a dirt cutter show, like every week, and then I'm hoping that they also do a rotational show. Munkin, Warhop, Mike Smith, those type of deals, where they also field questions, via Twitter, or they did a lot last year through the Buccaneer app. You could actually send your questions through the app on your phone. So I'm hoping it's just not I want a dirt cutter show. I'm hoping it's not one or the other. I'm hoping it's not like the rotation of coaches or just dirt cutter. I hope it's both, because I will be sort of upset if I don't get both. I mean, I want to hear a dirt cutter show every week, and I want to hear a coaches show every week with rotating coaches. I just hope it's not one or the other. But after that, she said it's going to be a rotating player show, and that's her show. She didn't imply or say that the coach's show was going to be hers as well, but she'll be hosting the rotational player show, and she said, "Don't fear, Alvin, I did it again, Ali and Donovan, Alvin, that's them. They're a couple. They're Alvin. Ali and Donovan will be on," and she even joked like they'll be on multiple times, and said, at one point, like, "No, Jameis, that's okay. Like we don't need to talk to you. I'm bringing Ali and Donovan on again." So we are going to get a little bit of Ali and Donovan together again. I just got a great idea. I'm going to tweet at Donovan Smith and see if he wants to do. I'm going to suggest that him and Ali get a podcast together, because they can make a little extra more money, honestly. And I think they're hilarious. But they're going to have to hire somebody probably to put in the work as far as like what they're going to talk about and things like that. I'm not sure either of them, really care about a podcast enough to they just kind of want to show up and sit down. That's what was so great about Casey. She could just keep the show rolling, and they just had to answer questions and tell stories. But when you have to do sort of the prep work, podcasting is not quite as fun. So to finish off the first segment, I just wanted to get that out there that it's a very sad day in Buccaneer fandom land as the Ali Marpet and Donovan Smith show is no longer. That's going to move us over to injuries. It was true. I did see Mike Evans walk off the field yesterday. They didn't say he was asked. Dirk Cutter was asked about it in his press conference. They didn't say anything. It was just like, like, is Mike Evans serious? No, that was the answer. And Dirk Cutter has warned us that he's not going to be as divulging as he was before about injuries and length and time and what they are and all those sorts of things. And like I said, I'm okay with that. Do I think Mike Evans will play against the Browns? I think he definitely could. If you twist my arm, I'm going to say yes. I don't think he has to. And now I'm talking about it. I'm not sure we'll see Mike Evans against the Browns because there's no reason to. Him and Jameis seem to be mid-season form already through practices and what I'm sure what the listeners you guys have seen in the two preseason games so far. So can he play? For sure. Now I'm thinking about it, I don't think he will play in the Browns game. Bond is still out. He's got a leg brace on. I don't think he'll play. Sweezy just had another maintenance day. He looked fine. He was actually doing some warm-up drills with Warhop with actually, a little bit of contact and lots of hand movement and punches and jabs and things. So I think Sweezy will play on Saturday. Josh Robinson, I don't think so. He's pretty much. I think he's going to make the roster and he's set with special teams. I don't really know what's ailing him. No one's asked about him. He's just outside of the depth chart where sort of the beat reporters care about if Robinson is playing or not. Let's face it. He's not Grimes. He's not Quan. He's not Mike Evans. So not a lot of questions. They're like, when's Josh Robinson coming back? But if I had to guess, I'm going to say no, he didn't. He's not coming back. Demir Dotson was out today. Again, I don't think he'll be playing Saturday. Just a precautionary thing. Groins and hamstrings can be very fickle, so the longer you give them to rest, the better they are. I wouldn't be surprised if you don't see Dot play the rest of all of preseason. It's pretty obvious he's not going to play week 4, but you might not even see him on the practice field or hear, because practice, like I said, will be over. You might not even hear that he's back on the practice field until after the week 4 preseason game, and they start, really ramping up for Miami. Caleb, he was also out. I think he could play. I don't think he will. Quan was out. I think he could play. I don't think he will. And finally, Grimes. I think Grimes can play for sure. He's actually suiting up. But today, like yesterday, he would run the individual drills, wouldn't run the 7-on-7s, wouldn't run the 11-on-11s. But you've seen videos and people talk like he's always active on the sideline, sort of doing his own thing, working. I don't mean doing his own thing as he's being coy and aloof, but he's always doing some type of drill when it's not his turn to go. But today he came out in full pads, and I think halfway through the practice, he had his shoulder pads off and his helmet off, and he was over there with Josh Robinson working on some things. And finally, something we haven't talked about yet, and I feel a little remiss, like I've let you down. Dante Dye is still on this team. He's been injured, and he's been injured a while. I think he was actually injured before the Bengals game, but everybody else that's injured has been waived, almost automatically, besides Ryan Griffin or the people that I've just talked about. Starters, backups, guys that have been on draft picks, guys that have been on the team a little while. Dye is, you probably know, he floats up and down between the practice squad and the 53 man. Almost last year he did that a lot. So, but by keeping him still, it sort of makes me think that he's seriously in the running for that 5th wide receiver spot. Now they're going to have to do some things, and that's quite a leap of faith because Dye's hands are also a little bit on the suspect side. I don't think they're nearly as bad as Huff's. If I was going to rate hands, I would say Reedy, Dye, Martino, Huff, and Huff is way at last as far as who I trust to catch. If I'm going to throw the ball to this guy, who do I trust to catch it? That would be the way I would rank them. Would be once again Reedy, Dye, Martino, Huff. Um, but we'll see. But it's interesting that he's still on the team and they haven't waived him. He was an undrafted free agent. He sort of got on the fans' bad side very early because he did have a couple of drops, when he got on the field. And there was that one play where he caught the ball and no one touched him, and he sort of started dancing and doing the first down thing, where he could have just walked into the end zone and scored. So there's been some bonehead things early on where first impressions last the longest. But obviously the Bucs like him because they have had every opportunity just to, cut / injure, waive him. But he's still there. So that's a name that we haven't talked about, and I haven't heard anyone else talk about for a while for that fifth wide receiver position. So, just something to keep in mind that, there's a reason why Dye's still on this team and has been injured for, weeks now. So this will bring us to the practice, the old first out, Cepho Lufau, Blue Cow. He was first out, and also, no surprise, Alan Cross was first out as well. Besides that, it's always sort of the same guys, and I'll report on it tomorrow. Maybe I'll give an award for first out the most. I'm sure the player will be thrilled to hear they won it. But like I said, it's just something sort of get this segment started. Then Fitzpatrick came out, James pretty early. Kevin Pamphil's like third day out early. And then the sort of 8 of the next 11 guys are always tight ends because they always start their drills a little early before everyone else. So, sort of the status quo is the first guy out today. The O-line was the same today as it was yesterday. If you didn't hear the podcast, with Benenoch being out and Dot being out and Sweezy being out, they started Donovan Smith. I'm going to go from left to right. Donovan Smith, tackle. Then they kicked Kevin Pamphil all the way to the other side to right tackle, and they slid in Evan Smith there. So Donovan Smith, Evan Smith, Marpet at center. And then instead of bringing in like a third-string guard, because the backup guard seems to be Benenoch, in my opinion, so Sweezy's out, Benenoch would be the next man up, possibly, but they brought in Joe Hawley, which we have not, at least I have not seen him play anything but center since he's been here with the Buccaneers. I don't think he's in any danger of missing the team or being cut. It's just good to see that interior line seems to be the real strength of the O-line as far as like bouncing people around in multiple positions with, Marpet, Sweezy. We don't know how mobile or versatile he could be right now, but Pamphil for sure he can play like guard, like looks like he can play all 4 spots. Alley's never played tackle, but yeah, I'm just sort of getting ahead of myself. But Benenoch and Hawley and Smith and Pamphil and Alley, like those 4 guys seem like they can play any of those 3 interior positions, and plus Pamphil can play right tackle as well. So that's the same offensive line. Like I said, they ran out as yesterday, mostly obviously because due of injuries. Once again, I think a lot of these injuries, these guys would play. Definitely it was a playoff game. Probably if it was a regular season game, but there's just really no point to play them during the preseason. With Quan out, once again, it was Glanton, Darius Glanton, Levante David, and Kendall Beckwith. Beckwith playing the Sam, Glanton playing the Mike, and Levante David playing the Will. And Glanton looks good again. I've been high on this kid since last year. His tackling to play ratio was probably the best on the team. And what I mean by that was if he was on the field for like 11 plays, he would make like 6 to 7 tackles. So the amount of plays he was on the field to, actually making tackles, the ratio was probably the best on the team. I think the only guy that could even compete with that would be Quan, and just because the sheer mass of tackles he's made, but he's on the field a lot. He never comes off, so I feel very confident saying that would go to Glenn. And it looks like you saw him in the second half when the second unit came in for the who'd we just play? The Jags, the Jacksonville game. He had a tackle for loss, he had a sack. And made like 6 tackles. Riley Bulla sort of did the same thing. It seems like the Mike linebacker in this defense just makes tackles. You got Quan, who led the league in total tackles last year. Seems Glanton got like 6 tackles in a quarter and a half, and then Riley Bulla came in and got like 6 tackles in like 5 minutes. So good stuff from all levels of the middle linebacking core. But as of right now, it looks like Glanton is a lock to make the team. Keep 5 linebackers, so that leaves you Beckwith, Avante David, Quan Alexander, Glanton, and one other. So it's really going to hinge on where Bond is with his injury. Like, are they going to put him on IR again and give him the season off? Maybe they'll give him IR with able to return like somewhere week 6, week 7. Are they going to use one of their 2 on that with Bond? Do they need to, because it's Beckwith playing so well? But then if Beckwith goes down, then what do you do? So it's going to be very interesting to watch sort of that 5th linebacking spot. If Bond wasn't injured, I would just go ahead and say, like, it'd be Bond, and the other guys, played well, like, the Richie Browns and the Lynches, Cameron Lynch and the Jeff Knox, obviously the Riley Bullas. So it's a deep core there. They've got a lot of talent at the linebacking spot, but I think they're going to keep 5. If they keep 6, Bulla might make the team. I've gone on record before that I think with all the sort of pub he got, behind the scenes leadership that came out through Hard Knocks, and other teams get to see that. If they cut Bulla, I'm sure they want to bring him back on the practice squad, but I don't think he will be back. I think there's a team out there that I think all teams really value that leadership, and a team that's not quite as strong as the linebacking core as the Buccaneers, which is very few teams do have sort of that 1-2 punch that we do, can find a place in the NFL for Riley Bulla. So I think he's going to be fine. I'd love to see him stay, but I think he's going to be fine. Something I also saw was heartening, another sort of rounding out those bubble positions. I told you yesterday how Alan Cross was playing first team kickoff coverage, and so was Ryan Russell. I still can't believe Ryan Russell was doing that. I might have looked that wrong, but he was in there. Was on this first team kickoff coverage. So they had first team kickoff return today, and Alan Cross is out there again. Sort of the guys in the back, the wedge guys, like there's a guy in the end zone area that catches the kickoff, and then he has one guy directly in front of him, sort of 3 guys in front of that guy. So those 4 guys that aren't catching the ball, the back guy who would be directly in front of the guy catching the kickoff was Charles Sims, and then sort of his 3 blockers was Alan Cross, which is good to see. So now looks like he's starting on kickoff and kickoff returns, which even makes you think more that he's going to make the team. Luke Stocker, which is no surprise, the tight ends of Westbrook, Eau Claire, haven't really shown their blocking ability or athletic ability or hands ability, and they definitely don't have his knowledge and sort of the extra coach on the field to push the old man out. He's probably the least athletic of the group, but his superior blocking skills and just his knowledge that he'll be able to pass along to the other tight ends that make the team. So it looks like Stocker's a lock. I shouldn't say a lot, but it looked like Stocker's in good shape right now. And then Anthony Auclair was the third guy, which I said yesterday, it's easy to replace, one of these players on special teams, but they're definitely trying to find a spot for Anthony Auclair to make the team. Like, you have to make yourself. You have to be able to do something. You can't just be the fourth tight end and and only get in like once, twice a play, or you don't get in until someone gets injured. You have to contribute on special teams, and it looks like they're trying to find spots for this guy to make the team. So I thought that was interesting. Cross looking good, Stocker looking good, and they're looking, they are trying to give Eau Claire a spot, to justify him making the 53-man roster. And then finally, Chris Godwin ran with the ones today. With Mike Evans out, the ones, instead of, like I reported yesterday that Reedy was running with the ones, but this would be like a Godwin, Deshaun Jackson, Adam Humphries, Cameron Brate, Doug Martin. That would be sort of the 1-3 wide receiver set. When they went to 3 wide receiver sets, that's who was out there. And he, it's been a long time since people have talked about him. Maybe he wasn't getting thrown the ball a lot, or it's just becoming expected for when we see Godwin throwing the ball, we expect him to make the catch, and even if it's a difficult catch, now we already expect it. It's like, oh, okay, yeah, no big deal. He does that all the time. But he had a good day today. Quite a few, I don't say spectacular catches, but difficult catches. The difficulty level would have been up there, sort of in Olympic diving. Just a very difficult dive. So his weighted catch average would have been very high, his final score, so to speak. And being on the number one sort of, running with the ones, he got the ball was thrown to him a lot more today as well. So the ball found him. He made the catches. He looked good. Contested catches, high point catches, one-handed catch at one point. So all's well in the world of Chris Godwin. And then just to finish up, these are some things that I saw that I just thought were funny. Most of them. When they were doing a kickoff or a punt coverage drill, lots of punt coverage today again. Lots of special teams practice again today. A little bit of install, but it was all install and special teams. You can tell when they're doing install because they turn the music off, and the players have to be able to hear the coaches. Another clue is they have their helmets off and they're walking their drills. So we have seen a lot of special teams drills, but the music was on. Today was sort of installs. There was another fake punt today. They did a little bit with something that I've never seen, and Derek Fournier from What the Buck was sitting in front of me, and he's the one who sort of pointed it out, was they were practicing onside kick coverage, like, sort of spitting the ball out of the jug machines on both sides, different heights, different distances. They didn't do it for very long. But it was the first time I've ever seen like a team really practice. I mean, they have to, but it was just something that you didn't see very often, or even hear very often, or you haven't even been reported on very often about a team that actually was doing onside kick drills, coverages, and things. So during one of those punt drills, Vernon Hargraves was playing an outside gunner. And this is real close to the stand. So he goes and he's walking back and practices very fast. So probably by the time he gets back to the gunner spot, they've probably already, ran the drill 2 more times. There's always like this chain of gunners sort of running down the field and walking back, running down the field and jogging back. And he went to one of the assistants. If you don't know, the assistants are, they're the guys who are not the coaches. They don't have the word assistant in front of them. They sort of shag balls, move bags, throw balls to backs, receivers, tight ends, things like that you don't that they don't have a quarterback arm for. But so Vernon was jogging back to from just doing a gunning rep, and he put out his hand for the high five, and the guy sort of like he looked away. It wasn't like he looked at Vernon and looked away. He just really didn't see it. And then the crowd was very light today. The lightest it's ever been. But there's only one more practice. You've probably been to them all. You've seen it. And honestly, like I said, there's lots of special teams drills. But sort of a couple people in the crowd were like, whoa. So Vernon turned around and was like, it was almost like a Captain Fear moment. He was pantomiming, sort of to the crowd. And it was like, with his hand up, like, don't leave me hanging. But the guy had sort of turned the other way. Like, he did not want at all to look at Vernon. So, and not that, he was like, oh, I hate you, Vern, I'm not looking at you. It was just sort of like, I'm invisible. I understand I'm invisible, so I'm not going to make eye contact with any of the players and let them go around their business. And while he's doing that, Vernon's like, all right, man, like, give me a high five. And so wherever the guy was looking, Vernon was on the other side of him, like with his hand out, and finally had to like tap him on the elbow. And he gave him like, the high five and, the bro hug, how guys hug now. Uh, the high five and then claps, and you bring him in, and the other free arm, taps him on the back with a half hug. So they did that, and there was like a very mild cheer, like yay, like they figured it out, yay, we saved humanity. But I just thought that was funny that Vernon sort of had to keep going back to this guy just to get his high five, so he wouldn't be left hanging. Coach Cutter was sort of in a good mood. He wasn't by the end of practice. At the beginning, one of the early drills, they were running this out route, but they had the assistants with bags, with the long arm. I think I heard Greg Allman call it the crayon pad, which I really like. It just goes over your arm up all the way up to your elbow, and it looks like a red crayon, actually. Say one guy doing that, waving it, and then for the height of the ball, Dirk Cutter was the linebacker, and he had just a regular blocking bag, and he'd hold it over his head, so the quarterback would have to fit it through that little window into the pattern where the guy was. And the last rep Jameis was throwing, Cutter tossed his bag up in the air and knocked the ball down, and that got a little cheer from the crowd, like, hey, and Cutter was smiling before that, and everything seemed, it was very lighthearted, and Cutter sort of acknowledged the crowd, and and did like the double point, like you guys, and clapped a little bit, and some, the fans clapped, and you're the man, Cutter, we love you, blah blah blah. So that was one of the few times I've seen Dirk actually interact with the crowd at all. So that was nice to see. It was fun. Oh, I forgot to look this up. Darn it. Brent Grimes, I talked about, was hanging out with Josh Robinson a lot. Near the end of practice, they're over on field 2, and Brent was standing on one sideline, and Josh Robinson was standing on the other sideline, sort of like they were on opposite teams or an NFL game looking at each other. And they were trying to throw the ball in the air the entire distance of the width of the field. So you'd see Grimes like wind up and throw as far as he could and bomb, and it took him a couple of times. Like it would come up like just a yard short, and it took me a while to figure out what they were doing, but it would land, and Josh wasn't trying to catch it, so I'm like, what are they doing? And he just sort of like waved like no, and then Grimes would kind of like kick his head back in the air and do like a half spin and be like darn it. So he tried again. I'm like, what are these guys doing? Until finally, when it landed, Josh sort of checked it with his foot, maybe like a tennis judge would go out to a clay court and see if the ball was in or out because it left a mark. And so Josh looking down and looking at the mark, and he looks at Brent Grimes, sort of gives a thumbs up, and Brent does a little jump in the air. So then it was Josh Robinson's turn. So I thought it was funny that these guys, that's very little league stuff. Like I remember being in little league and standing on the first baseline, and after practice we would all get 3 throws to see if we could throw to the left field fence. No, this is little league, so the fence is only like like 219, so it's not that far. But it just sort of reminisced back to that type of play where these guys, it's practice, we're out here, but hey, let's go find something more fun to do. Let's see what else was left. I guess that sort of brings us to the end of practice things. Tandy, same as always. I shouldn't say same as always, but he's still taking a few snaps and practicing on his catching, receiving the snap and placing the ball for field goals. Maybe he's the emergency snap holder. Let's see what else. And then, yeah, sort of like the basic stuff. There's 2 jugs going again today. The Jameis Winston, Cameron Brate seem to be the only two. I didn't hang out very late today. It was a light crowd, so I just really the only reason I did hang out was to see if the quarterbacks and tight ends would do it, and it was just Jameis Winston and Cameron Brate. But there has been this player who has shed his shoulder pads but keeps his helmet on. Um, and he's going over there sort of running routes, not tight end routes, but wide receiver routes. And I noticed it yesterday, and I'm like, oh, that's probably no big deal. But then he was out there very early when it was just those three, very early, sort of in the quote unquote drills they're running. So I'm calling him the Masked Avenger because I don't know who he is, and I can't really. I see a set of shoulder pads, but it's on the far end of the field, and it's tucked under, so you only see a little bit of a number. But I'm going to tomorrow, as soon as practice ends, definitely looks to see like stripped off their pads and going over there and see which wide receiver, because it's not Deshaun Jackson, obviously today it's not Mike Evans, it's not Chris Godwin. You can tell Godwin because he's bigger than most. It might, it might be Chris Godwin. I shouldn't say it's not, but it's definitely not Hump, and we know why I can tell it's not Hump. So it's like it could be Godwin, Huff, Reedy, Martino. It could be Bobo Wilson. It could be Walker. So I want to find out who's sort of putting in the extra work now, has noticed that this extra work is going on with Winston after practice every day, and is kind of sticking their nose in there and trying to get in there. And finally, the kids line was only about 10 people today. That's how light practice was. If you don't know, in the Midway Carnival section, there's a place where you can sign up, and right before practice ends, you line up on one end of the bleachers, and they march you out in between field 1 and field 2. So behind the end zone of field 1, and then you make a right-hand turn, or excuse me, a left-hand turn, and you stand in between field 1 and field 2, and you're just a little kid, and you sort of stand there, and it guarantees you a autograph. Like, some players, there's usually like 3 or 4, sometimes 5 players over that are signing stuff for the kids. But early on, like, this line would stretch from end zone to end zone, like the whole entire 120 yards. And today, like, there was probably 10 kids in that line. So good for them, because they definitely they probably had their choosing. Like, who are you? Yeah, no, I just I want this hat to be signed by Jameis Winston. Like, I want it to be special. I just don't want it to be a hat with some scribble marks on it. Not that any of the kids did that, but you know what I mean. So that sort of gives you an idea of how light the practice is, and I'm not saying that bad or like there's no fan attendance. Just how it's starting to wind down, and it seems that even for me, who I love, like, even waking up at 6 o'clock in the morning to drive there just so I can wait a half hour outside the gate, because if I don't, I'll be late, because that's when the traffic starts to back up between St. Pete and Tampa. Even someone who loves doing that, the practices and the repetition are starting to wear on me a bit too. And I'm actually there taking notes and doing something, not just, watching for my pleasure. So that will do it. What a great way to end the cast, end the pod. Thank you for listening and downloading. Tomorrow will be the last entry of Training Camp Journals with Ren. Oh, I'm pushing my time limit again. So I'm going to end this very quickly. This podcast falls under the family of the PewterCast podcast. You can find me on Twitter at Ren Daxt, REN_DAXT. Once again, I'm always down to talk Buccaneers football. And tomorrow I will see you for the last entry, entry 16. Thanks for listening. See you later. Go Bucs.